No sound?
No sound, yeah. Welcome, everyone. I'm Lori Castles. I'm a member of Irish America Writers and Artists, and I'm so proud and thrilled to be hosting today's salon. Why I'm proud is this organization has just been so welcoming and just so uplifting for so many artists. And I'd like to tell you our mission. We celebrate the achievements of Irish Americans, artists both past and present, and we aim to highlight, energize, and encourage Irish Americans active in the arts. We support artistic freedom, human rights, and social justice. And I'm thrilled that one of the benefits of the pandemic was the ability to have Zoom salons, because the history of Irish American writers and artists was in-person salons in New York, of which they resumed, and they usually do it once a month. But we are able, through Zoom, welcome and showcase Irish American artists across America. And we have such a terrific group tonight. But before we get to our group, I want to introduce their co-host, because I'm so proud to be able to share this and co-host with Catherine Barry, founder and director of Irish Culture Bay Area. Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you, Lori.
And maybe just tell us a little snippet about Irish Culture Bay Area before we introduce.
I will. I've been in the Bay Area since the mid-90s, actually, working in the Irish art scene for a lot of that time. Actually, I'm also working with SF. I'm editor of SF Arts Monthly, a mainstream arts publication here. So my little mission is to get Irish culture and art into the mainstream arts in the Bay Area. But I want to echo what Laurie said about the benefit of COVID, if there was any. But this is one that, we are united, bi-coastal, and I think it's really exciting. I'm very excited to have such access to our East Coast brothers and sisters. So yeah, so thank you, everybody, and thank you, Laurie, for all the hard work you do. I just pop in and fluff up the cushions at the end after Laurie's work. But
you helped get a few of attendees today. That's great.
Yeah, I put on an Irish Writers Festival for 3 years here in the South Bay, in a town that's a sister city with Listowel Arts Writers Festival in Ireland. So we might resume that hopefully sometime. That was pre-COVID.
Great news.
Brought 14, 15 writers from Ireland, filmmakers, writers, artists from Ireland each time. So, and now Culture Ireland is, very eager to see us share events. So hopefully we can all work together at getting a good circuit for Irish writing over here too. But meanwhile, we have a lot to be getting on with our own writers, homegrown. So, so should we start, Laurie?
Yes, let's start. Yeah.
Okay. So first up, we have Victoria, I will say Costello, and I'm not sure if it's Costello or Costello.
Well, it's wonderful to be in a group where there's more than one of me, Brendan, because most people who are not of Irish descent don't even realize that we are an Irish name. So, but we've adapted to Costello.
Costello, as in Elvis,
Yeah.
not Costello. So Victoria is an Emmy Award-winning writer with a published memoir and an upcoming autobiographical novel of her 3-generation Irish-American journey from Galway to the Bronx and back, titled Orchid Child. So perhaps you'd like to, I see it behind you there, Victoria, on the shelf.
It is
here. Obviously in print.
Yes, it is. It's not actually out until June 13th, but I'm going to share some thoughts. I was going to read just from the novel, but last week I wrote down some thoughts that came to me as I watched Joe Biden do his grand tour of Ireland. And it ran as a opinion piece yesterday in an Irish publication called Village Magazine Ireland, whose editor made just one small change. Instead of my original title, which was The Fairy Eddy of Irish American Sentimentality, he ran it under the headline, The Tragedy of Biden's Nostalgia for the Future. Clearly, my title was not tragic enough for him. But other than that, we did fine. So I will get started. Towards the end of my forthcoming novel, Orchid Child, an American teenager is walking in a wooded area of East Galway with an older Irish relative he's just met, when a gust of wind rises seemingly from nowhere, creating a tornado of leaves and twigs. We call that a fairy eddy, the old man tells his visitor, noting that the good folk must be pleased at this meeting of far-flung kin. I view this bit of folklore as an apt metaphor for the swirl of emotions generated by Joe Biden's trip. Like everything else about the relationship between the Republic and its 32 million far-flung American kin, it's complicated. From both sides of the Atlantic, we could share an easy laugh. Oh, that's my cat whining. We could share an easy laugh about the British display of pique over POTUS relishing his Irish roots for 4 whole days while skipping the coronation. To which I say, spare us, and Harry and Meghan too, while you're at it. Many can also relate to Fintan O'Toole's discomfort about Biden's outdated conflation of Irishness with Catholicism. As is true in both countries, the church is simply no longer the church. A fair number of us have one foot in paganism. Where it gets trickier is when we take in the embarrassed reactions of Irish commentators at Biden's unabashed sentimentality. I get it. The republic that exists in our Irish American imagination can be cringeworthy to today's politically progressive, Eurocentric Irish. And yet Joe Biden makes a good point when he says, you can be nostalgic about the future. Whether intended or not, I take this line of his to refer to an American future that no longer looks as good as it did when our grandparents left West Ireland for the US Eastern Seaboard. It's like we're on a runaway train, watching ourselves return to the bad old days. In comparison, Ireland appears as a bastion of liberal democracy. The ironies abound. Allow me to digress. The original motivation for me looking into my Irish roots was a mental health crisis in one of my sons, which evolved to my writing a novel based loosely on the family history I uncovered. When I started digging, I knew nothing more than my grandparents' names, Michael and Ellen Costello, not even what county they'd left behind, Galway, as it turns out. This wholesale ignorance, I've discovered, is entirely typical. I argue it's also unhealthy for us each as individuals and for the collective. For my grandparents, assimilation was a matter of survival, not for themselves. Indeed, both were dead within 12 years of their arrival at Ellis Island, but for those who came after them. For my parents, it was a choice. I remember my mother expressing no interest in keeping touch with any relatives with an address outside the tri-state area. For me and my siblings, assimilation was a done deal. But at what cost? That's the question I grappled with as I wrote what became Orchid Child. My protagonist, Kate, is a neuroscientist, the family's second-generation success story, who brings her nephew, the teenager who encounters the fairy eddy and is the orchid child of the title, to West Ireland, unaware that she stepped foot on the same ground her grandparents fled 80 years earlier. The choice of this scientific specialty for my main character reflects my fascination with the epigenetics of generational trauma, how the effects of famine, war, poverty, and forced emigration cross generations and shape our mental and physical health. One of the first Ireland-specific research papers I came across that mentioned this principle was done by Dermot Donaldson, writing about a new paradigm for psychotherapeutic treatment of troubles-related PTSD in Northern Ireland. His paper contained a poetic phrasing that you'll see frequently invoked by people working in this field. Quote, "The generations are boxes within boxes. Inside my mother's violence, you'll find another box, which contains my grandfather's violence. And inside that box, you'll find another box with some such secret energy, stories within stories receding in time," unquote. To borrow from Joan Didion, who famously pointed out that we tell ourselves stories in order to live, I wonder if we don't also change the stories we tell in order to heal. But what are we healing exactly? Could it be that along with being the beneficiaries of our grandparents' American dream, we inherited a subterranean fear that we really don't belong anywhere, which contributes to another major American problem, that our family, the land of immigrants, displays such an appalling lack of empathy towards any new immigrants to our shores. No one thing ever tells the whole story, but I suspect our unconscious emotions about a lost homeland, in this case, Ireland, can give us a window on parts of ourselves we lost and might still retrieve. It's in this context that Joe Biden's sentimentality and mine can perhaps best be understood. When I located the ruins of my grandfather's family cottage, my feeling of belonging to that place was uncanny. Call it quantum entanglement or plain old sentimentality. It was overwhelming. Even more so when I met a cousin, Liam Costello, who shared things with me he'd heard from his grandfather, William, about the 5 out of 9 Costello siblings who'd emigrated, including my grandfather, Michael. And that's when it all started to make sense. After all, our grandfathers were siblings. The fact that none of those who left ever returned, or that Liam and I didn't know the other existed before 2 years ago, doesn't change the power of our blood connection, or the relationship of those like me and Joe Biden, 2 or 3 generations removed, to the land of our ancestors. One thing that Liam said that day comes to mind, how back then, because so many in the West had siblings and children living in Lower Manhattan and the Bronx, those New York City boroughs felt closer to them than Dublin. So as Joe Biden challenges Americans again to remember who we are, it should come as no surprise to find that Ireland and everything she represents, past and present, feels closer and more vital than ever. And that is it.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Yay.
And I'm going to put in the chat my email if anybody is interested in receiving a review copy of Orchid Child, my novel. I'd be happy to share it with you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for
Very good.
listening.
Very profound, very thought-provoking. And I'd be curious to read about some of the Bronx sections because I'm a kid from the Bronx. But you had a few things. I've never heard of that term fairy, Eddie, and I just love it.
Cute one.
Yeah, it was just so visual and just my wife's family, when you talked about the immigrants, had have a saying, "I'm up, pull the ladder up," which is what I feel America's doing about immigrants these days. Like, we got here, we're good. I'm up, pull the ladder up, and it was a saying that I've often heard, but it makes me feel about this immigration crisis. But Victoria, that was quite thought-provoking. I thought we were going to be hearing from, but you did let me know that you were going to be changing to this because it's much newer, and I just loved hearing it, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. You're welcome.
And are familiar with our next presenter. David Coles is a writer living in Washington, D.C., where until September of 2021, he was the deputy senior producer for national affairs for PBS NewsHour. He was born and raised in Denver, Colorado, and has since lived in England and in New York City, where in his 20s and 30s, he worked as a bartender in Greenwich Village. David?
Yeah, hi, thank you, Lori. And I appreciate that. And I did work as a bartender in Greenwich Village in the 70s and a little beyond. And I should mention, since I know he's here, that I worked in a place called the Bells of Hell on 13th Street, which was named by and originally owned by Malachi McCord. And I worked for Malachi in another place, but Malachi had moved on from the Bells when I got there. And so I worked for a former bartender of Malachi's named Peter Myers. And Malachi I've known for many years. And Malachi will recognize this reading. I've been writing about the village for some time now, and this is a chapter that is really a profile of another bartender at another bar called the Lion's Head. And his name was Archie Mulligan. And Archie, like a lot of village bartenders and waitresses and everybody in the village, was something else. Archie and they were writers, they were authors, they were poets, they were playwrights, they were dancers, they were actresses. Archie was an actor, and that'll come. He was also quite a storyteller and a bit of a fabulist, I'm afraid. In fact, he was a fabulist of some considerable notoriety in the village. So this is a chapter from that book, and I'll try to be quick with it. As I came into the Lion's Head that afternoon, Archie was already deep in conversation with a group of people at mid-bar, though I recognized none of them. Excuse me, pardon me. People new to the bar, I assumed. I walked past them and took a stool up at the service end. Archie was pouring their drinks, and I could hear talking about acting, about Hollywood, about how it was all just a matter of time before everything opened up for him. Pardon me. Yeah, I could be on my way out to the coast very, very soon, he said. My brother's out there, doing quite well, too. Archie often did, go on like this all day, telling his endless Hollywood stories. He could tell you how he'd met Richard Burton at a party and given him a good talking to about the way he was treating Liz. Or on another day, with another audience, how he'd coached him on the best inflection for a certain line in The Taming of the Shrew. Or how just last month he bumped into somebody somewhere in encounters which invariably took place in locations that were recognizable, but not well known to his listeners, who'd said that he, Archie, would be perfect for the part of so-and-so in his new play. Or how somebody else was writing a screenplay with just him in mind and how it was all about to break open for him, just as soon as the money came together. Then they'd be calling to have lunch and talk it over, see what it would take for him to consider taking on the project. Just a matter of time, if, that is, he decided it was the right thing for him right now, something he wanted for his career at that particular moment. Archie's stories enchanted tourists, amused the regulars, and infuriated Wes, the owner of the Lion's Head. God damn it, Arch, that's bullshit, he'd fume, stepping to the hatch and lowering it and setting his coffee cup and saucer down as he picked up the thread of conversation. Wes would then stand quietly at the hatch a few minutes, letting Archie carry on, sipping his coffee, taking it all in. But before long, he'd start to press Archie about the details, following the tale's every nuance, tracking the inconsistencies he was sure he'd sniffed out this time, challenging the slightest discrepancy between today's telling of the story and the hundreds of other times he'd heard it. He did this somewhat fondly, but never in jest. Archie was prone to exaggeration, possibly delusion, and Wes wasn't going to let it pass. Not today, not ever. But at the moment, Wes was nowhere to be found, and Archie was rolling on uninterrupted. If you bump into John Huston out there, tell him Red Mulligan says hello. I met him up in Maine once, and that's what he called me Red. When Archie took a breath, I caught his eye and ordered a beer. He reached in the ice and came down the duckboards carrying the bottle, still talking steadily over his shoulder to the people at mid-bar, never missing a beat. He pried the bottle cap off in the opener, set my beer in front of me, and then turned to grab glass. But turning back to me, glass in hand, he came to a particularly vital point in his storytelling and stalled. then started using the glass as a prop, talking on about the life of the actor, his listeners riveted, hanging on every word. I took a sip of beer from the bottle, hoping that might prompt Arch to remember that that was my glass in his hand, but he just rattled on. After a minute, he seemed suddenly to become aware of the object in his hand, looking at the glass as if he had no idea how he'd ended up with it. Then, still talking, he plunged it into the wash sink, rinsed and returned it to the drain board, drying his hands on the towel hanging from the back bar, never taking a breath in his story. He'd also forgotten to charge me, a mulligan habit. Dermot McAvoy and other afternoon regulars frequently tormented Archie with this tendency of his, ordering drinks, even calling for whole rounds, their money prominently laid out in the bar, but then at exactly the right moment, presenting Archie with a strategic and irresistible question, something about maybe about that time he said he worked with Richard Woodmark in summer stock, or about the Frazier fight last week. What did he think of it as a boxer? Another so far underappreciated mulligan gift. And he'd be off telling a tale everyone had heard some version of, getting ever more deeply involved, forgetting everything else. Excitement rippled through the co-conspirators crowded along the bar, their sly smirks hidden behind half-tip mugs of beer, or hands cupped to strike a match, their eyes flickering face to face, then to Dermot's bill lying untouched on the bar. Archie, believing his storytelling to be working this effect, plunged on. In most cases, the offending hustler would eventually reveal the gambit and settle up, with everyone, including Archie, roaring out great whoops of laughter at the cleverness of it all. Oh yeah, you guys, you're a lot of fun, you are, Archie would laugh, biting his lower lip, bobbing and weaving, dancing back and forth as he snatched the money off the bar with a quick boxer's jab to show just how sharp he was. Archie also had a deep reservoir of boxing stories. So I says to Ali, champ, you got to lay off of that punch. It leaves you open to the hook. He'd grab Dermot's bill, then turn and bound down the duck boards to the register in a kind of slow motion run, laughing and shaking his head in fun of himself. Archie's tales, though always outrageous, always improbable, were never quite impossible. The truth was, no one except Wes cared. Part of Archie's charm was the way he could stand at the bar, stand behind the bar, and tell you what he would have Brando do, if only he'd listen. Then he'd take off, going right into character, as he was doing now, to the wonder of his latest audience, performing a scene he had somehow committed to memory, whether from work in the theater somewhere or from having attended the movie several dozen times, I could never be sure. Either way, the mulligan matinee was now in full swing. You should have taken care of me just a little bit better so I didn't have to take them dives for the short end money, Archie was saying, fully in character. I glanced around, trying to gauge the reaction of others at the bar. No one said a word, their attention rapt. You don't understand. I could have had class. I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody instead of a bum, which is what I am, let's face it. See that? Arch broke in on his own performance, wanting to make clear how well it was working. That's how I'd have done it. This next bit is my favorite, he said, hooking his finger in the air, bringing us all along. You remember that night in the garden? Archie turned slightly, holding his fists at his chest now, ducking and weaving, making short stabs in the air the way a fighter does, rocking his arms up and in, throwing his shoulders too. Then he turned and faced us head on. You said, kid, this ain't your night. We're going for the price on Wilson. I was beginning to feel a little embarrassed for Arch. He was how seriously he was taking this, how he was dragging it out. I hoped he'd bring it to an end soon before he made a fool of himself. Though I was also impressed with how well he seemed to know the words. Maybe he really was an actor. I could have taken Wilson apart, Archie snorted, shooting a couple of quick jabs in the air like he just couldn't keep himself from doing that when he uttered those words. Then he turned back to face us again, his voice strained, his face hot with rage and despair. So what happened? He gets a title shot outdoors in a ballpark, and what do I get? A one-way ticket to Palookaville. With that, Archie went still, heels together, arms tight at his sides, dropping his head in a slight bow, something a real fighter or actor might actually do. A one-way ticket to Palookaville, he repeated softly, his head still bowed. Somebody down the bar started to clap, then another and another. So I joined them, and then a delivery guy came thumping his heavily loaded two-wheel cart down the front steps, and it was over. Say, Arch, you got a glass? Righto, Denver, coming up. That's it.
It's wonderful.
Yay.
David, you need to do an audiobook. You've got a wonderful speaking voice.
Oh, that's very nice of you to say that. Thank you.
Bit of an actor in there too, I guess. bartenders have to be actors as well.
Many of them were, yes, as Maliki could attest, yes.
You've been writing for a long time.
For some years now.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Now we're moving on to Patty Carey. We're back in the West Coast, in Alameda, my home away from home. Actually, I love Alameda, where Laurie lives, and Patty Carey is from there, and her latest film project is called Alameda, a bittersweet love story about our hometown with a supernatural twist. So, with bated breath, we wait to find out more. Welcome, Patty.
Thanks so much.
There you are.
Thanks, Lori, for the invitation to participate in this wonderful group. I'm very happy to be here. Bear with me as I read my little pitch here, as I'm a little nervous. Again, yes, my name is Patty Carey, and I'm the founder of Funimeda Productions. We are an arts and entertainment company based out of Alameda, California. You're going to hear that word a lot, Alameda, throughout this. Since 2006, the mission of Funimeda is to work to enhance my community artistically through all-inclusive projects and events. As a side note, the name Funimeda comes from the fact growing up as kids in Alameda, we sarcastically called it Funimeda. So the name stuck. I'm very proudly of Irish descent, holding dual citizenship thanks to my mom's parents, who came to America in 1920 from Bangor in County Down. Thanks to that heritage, I've considered myself a storyteller from an early age. Through dance, photography, improv theater, writing, and now filmmaking. To me, a compelling story is the point. Last year, I turned 60, and in a rather panicked state of fear and inspiration, or probably more likely desperation, I turned to my friends and shouted, "Hey, let's make a movie." It's a throwback, maybe, I think, to my love of classic films a la Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney's "Let's Do a Play." Anyway, sticking to the adage, write about what you know, the result is our very micro budget, indie film entitled Alameda, of course, Alameda Here Is Anywhere. Having spent the last few years delving into the rich Irish history of fairy forts, portals, and the mysterious She and the Tuatha De Danann, I wanted to tell a modern tale of exploring unknown realms, to their own conclusions. Alameda is the story of a recently retired science teacher who is played by my oldest and dearest friend, whose name is also Patty. She's an Irish lass, Patty Devlin. She plays a teacher who experiences something she can't explain. The story is her search for answers and her coming to peace with the idea not all mysteries are meant to be solved. I call it, as was mentioned, a bittersweet love story to my hometown. So Brendan, get ready. Let's see the trailer, shall we?
Just be careful. You have no idea who you may be dealing with.
What does that even mean? What kind of information?
Let's go home, ladies.
Oh. Rusty?
Thanks so much for getting that organized, Brendan. Hopefully that wets your whistle. Look for Alameda Here Is Anywhere, hopefully coming to a film festival near you in the coming months. I'll put our website up in the chat and our Instagram handle. So if you want to follow us there. And again, thanks so much, Lori, for inviting me into this great group. And thanks to Brendan for his patience with my Luddite sensibilities this afternoon. Thanks for listening.
I that's a different trailer than I had saw, but I just definitely love it. This film is complete though, right? You've totally filmed it all.
Yes, we spent the summer filming because Patty is still a science teacher. So we did it during the summer. It's in post-production. We're doing a focus group 1st of May to get some feedback about the first cut, the rough cut. And then we hope to have it in the can by June, 1st of June. So we can start getting it out to those thousands of festivals that you need to submit to.
Yeah.
How long is it going to be? How long is it?
Right now it runs 75 minutes. So
Oh.
it's considered a feature, which,
Great.
you know, jumping into a feature, probably your first try is was a little ambitious, but I think I think the story is solid. So I'm excited about it.
So what other filmmaking have you, this is your first feature, but you've
Well, I've dabbled in fun, silly films pretty much as soon as I could hold a camera, but you know, with the iPhones now, it's filmed entirely on my iPhone in 4K. So everyone with a great idea and a camera can sort of put their mind to it if you have the desire to punish yourself. No, it's been great. But so yes, it's my first feature. So we'll see what happens with it.
Did you write the whole screenplay?
I did. I
Mhm.
did. I come from an improv background, so the script was very loose. And there was just pretty much a sort of a framework structure we needed to get from point A to B to C. And I let folks with a lot of freedom with what they said, just as long as they hit their mark, and they did. They were great.
And I remember you mentioned once, is it called the Bechtel rule? There's a rule where it's all Alameda actors and actresses, and the storyline is it's someone older, right? It's not, so what was that Bechtel rule is that there has to be 2 women above, over 40, and for a few minutes, they don't speak about a man. And I think that's,
Well,
isn't
interestingly,
there something called the Bechtel rule, something like that, no?
I don't know that, but interestingly, because I want the film to be somewhat ambivalent in that I'm not a fan of films that deliver the answer in a package deal. So Patty never mentions her status as with a partner or anything. There's no reference at all to her her
Keep the
partnership.
mystery. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But
It's not you know, important for the story, hopefully.
But do you learn where Rusty is? Because isn't that the big mystery? Ah, okay. Where is Rusty? Rusty.
Who is Rusty? Yeah.
Yeah.
You do if you're paying attention.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
This was great. Thanks so much.
Okay. Okay, moving on, I'd like to introduce, he's another former East Coaster and out west, not as far west as I am, but in Wyoming, pretty far west, where it's still snowing apparently. I'd like to welcome James A. Ross. He has various times been a Peace Corps volunteer in the Congo. He's been a congressional staffer and a Wall Street lawyer. His novels, Hunting Teddy Roosevelt, I have that, and The Cold Water Revenge and Cold Water Confession have won numerous literary awards. And he's a frequent contributor and several times winner of the live storytelling competition Cabin Fever Story Slam. His short stories, live performances, and more can be found on his website, James Ross Author. And I believe he's going to be reading from the 3rd of the Cold Water series. Welcome, James Ross.
Thank you, Lori. Thanks for inviting me. Yes, I'll be reading the opening scene from the third book in the Coldwater Mystery Trilogy. It's coming out in January of 2024. And if I'm extremely lucky, two things will happen. One, it will win a bunch of literary awards like the previous two books. And more importantly, two, it will be the last mystery I write, because writing a trilogy has proved to be quite a chore. And I'm just crawling to the finish line. But without further ado, here's the opening scene. Luke sat alone in a tree stand, silent, nervous, and unmoving. Randomly streaked with green camouflage paint, his neck and face felt hot and sticky. The worn brown wood of an ancient Browning compound bow that had belonged to his dad when he was a boy was too large for Luke's 10-year-old grip, but his other hand, attached firmly to the bowstring by a Velcro strap and mechanical release, would launch a lethal arrow at 300 feet per second with only the slightest pressure from his right index finger. Luke was excited, and for the first time in a long time, happy. Scanning the thorn-filled gully below the tree stand for sign of movement, he reminded himself that his dad was down there somewhere, slowly stalking uphill. Not quite silent, the sound of his father's footstep and cloth scraping against brush would push the deer, if there were any, towards Luke's tree stand. "Don't shoot unless you see horns," were his dad's final instructions. Luke wouldn't. He'd practiced, and he could hit the center of a pie plate at 30 yards, nearly every time. But his hands trembled, and the sound of his breath was loud in his ears. It took him a long time to settle down. An hour passed before he heard the telltale sound of hard hoof on dry leaf and saw movement behind a dense thicket of thorn bush. A doe and two yearlings appeared in the gully below his tree stand, dropping their heads to feed on fallen acorns. Luke's heart churned like a cake mixer. The wood under his hand felt moist. Opening the hand to admit dry air was a rookie mistake. 3 pairs of soft brown eyes turned toward the movement, then 3 snow-white tails lifted high in graceful bounds back into the thick cover. Luke let out a controlled breath. Wow. For the next few minutes, thoughts and feelings combined and recombined as if passing through a brass kaleidoscope. Red and ochre fall leaves, dappled deer, and the happiness he felt being back in Coldwater. Living with Grandma and Grandpa in Canada had been hard. They were nice people, but their house was small, and Grandpa could be grumpy. Mom had been quiet most of the time they were there. She still was. Dad seemed okay now. He didn't get angry with Luke or his sisters very often, or even with Mom anymore. Luke was happy to be back at his old school with his old friends and to be out in the woods with his dad. He hoped his parents would stay together for a long time. They'd been in the kitchen last night after Dad came home from his evening patrol. It was late and their voices woke Luke. He was afraid that they might be arguing about whether he was too young to go deer hunting. But after a while, he could tell that they were not talking about him or hunting, although he heard his name once. They weren't fighting. Maybe they would stay together. Another sharp and sudden crunch broke into Luke's reverie. Hooves? No, the sound was too loud. A voice? Dad said he might use a grunt call if he needed to. "If you think you hear me," he said, "be patient. Sound carries a long way in the woods. I might be close by, or I might not. Don't lift the bow until you see horns. Be sure." Crunch. Not hooves, but what? 2 bucks fighting? Or was Dad carrying a set of rattling horns? Luke couldn't remember. No, it was voices. Dad said he might use his voice to move the deer if they stopped for too long. Luke cocked his head, straining to hear. Adrenaline surged through his slim pre-adolescent body. Without thinking, and almost as if he were watching someone else. He felt himself stand, lift the bow, and pull the bowstring back to full draw. His dad had said to be still and remain patient. Don't lift the bow until you see horns. But it felt right to be ready. Soon, though, his thin, unmuscled arms began to quiver and the bow shake. Luke realized then that he could not hold the bow at full draw for very long, and he would have to put it down. But farther down the gully, brush moved and something passed behind a tree. Horns? His dad had warned him that branches can look like horns. Luke's arms trembled and the bow vibrated like a tuning fork. He could not hold it steady. Trying to ease his grip was his second mistake. The released tension abruptly transferred from the hand holding the bow to the fingers of the opposite hand attached to the bowstring. Just like that, Luke felt and heard a whoosh of an arrow launched through the air at lethal speed. He could not have held it back. Immediately there came a shout, or more accurately, a curse word. Luke's heart surged and he felt frightened and sick. Dropping the bow, he unbuckled the tree harness, scraping hands and face against the rough tree bark as he scrambled out of the stand and ran towards the sound. Up ahead, a man lay on his side, a hand covered in blood pressed to his lower back, and the other hand clamped to his front. Luke was afraid to go near him. The snap of dry wood sounded nearby, and Luke turned to see someone in green and brown camo running downhill, head covered in a tan fishing cap, with a flap in the back like the Japanese soldiers wore in old World War II movies. The man must have seen what had happened and was going for help or to get the police. Luke tried to shout, but no sound came from his mouth. He started to run after the fleeing figure, but he fell, his face plowing the soft earth. Then he thought he heard another voice, but he wasn't sure. He couldn't see his dad or hear him. He tried to shout, but no sound came. He stood and ran toward the voice or voices. He was scared. He had accidentally shot someone and they needed help, but he was all turned around and he didn't know where he was. He didn't know where his dad was. And that is the opening scene of Cold Water Endgame, the third and final volume in the Cold Water Mystery Series.
Wow. You need to put your website in the chat, actually. I'll do that in a second.
Thank you.
I think that should be optioned for a Netflix series. Should be.
From your mouth to God's ears.
Thank you, James. You go by James or Jim?
James to my mother when I was in trouble as a child. Other than that, it's Jim.
Okay. So you have a background, a legal background as well?
I'm a recovering lawyer.
Okay. So this is a preferable torture than trying to get a trilogy out.
Much preferable. I wrote my first book in college and I published my first one the same year I started collecting Social Security. So it's a long, long apprenticeship, but after that, it's worked out quite well.
And what's up next?
Not
another trilogy, we know that much.
No, if you go to my website, jamesrossauthor.com, there's a performance there that I did for The Moth, a adventure tale set in Africa, and making that into a full-length novel is, I hope, my next book.
Oh, did you spend a long time in the Congo?
I was there 2 years, first with the Peace Corps and then with CBS News.
Okay.
Exciting times.
Peace Corps was, when was that?
It was in the mid-70s, and the transfer from the Peace Corps to CBS News came about on account of the outbreak of the Civil War and the arrival of Cuban and other foreign mercenaries that created the kind of havoc that made teaching unappealing, and hooking up with a news team that actually had some money and a little bit of protection, much more exciting.
Right. Well, exciting history. We have our own history in the Congo, the Irish.
Ah,
Shadow-
oh, yeah.
should, anyway, I digress. Now I think we need a bit of music, Ms. Hogan. I'm going to introduce Amelia, lives in the Bay Area. We're in for a treat. She's just released a new album, Taking Flight, it's called, comprising of Irish, Scottish, British, and American tunes. And she brings an amazing lyrical voice to her work. Amelia, you might tell us a little bit about your journey from, I know music's been your life always, and you've gone from your Joni Mitchell influences to your Irish sean-nós singing. So you might tell us just a little bit about your journey to where you are now and your passion for sean-nós and folk singing. When you unmute yourself. Oh, are you unmuted? Oh. Brendan, help.
There's not much I can do, unfortunately.
Can't hear you. Does she know we can't hear her?
Amelia, I don't know if you can know that we can't hear you right now. So it might be necessary for you to like step out and step back into the chat or the Zoom. I'm sorry about that. Unless you can see if there's some other function on your computer to get the mic going.
Oh no.
Still nothing really. Can you hear us? Okay. What was the song you were going to sing? We could just try to improv it, I guess. Joking.
Sign language. Why don't you duck in and out and see what happens?
Yeah.
Okay. And Amelia was our last before the break. So Laurie, I'm not sure if you want to skip somebody forward or should we, let's see. Any luck with Amelia?
Not yet. I mean, I think she's gonna step out, although let's see.
She's back.
Is she back already? Let's see.
I wonder if it would help her if she rebooted.
I don't know if rebooting is gonna, first off, that might take a little bit while, but if she goes out of the Zoom and then comes back in,
And
that might do the trick.
Yeah, allow your computer to access the
Yeah.
mic kind of option.
Yeah.
So Laurie, should we bump somebody else up or would you prefer to? Oh, you're muted now. You're muted.
So Larry is going to be 5 minutes. Maybe, well, let me think. We could have someone else come or break.
I think if we're okay to have Larry and then Amelia might be ready to go and we can have a break and a shorter second half, maybe. This suits me because I have to go.
Oh, let's see.
I'd be happy to go ahead, Laurie.
So Larry McLaughlin.
Okay.
Enjoys writing about interesting people and compelling events in history. As a former educator, he believes an enjoyable story may be the best way to educate readers about history, as long as the historic aspect is told with fidelity to actual events. Well, that's a tall order, Larry. Larry is working on his second novel, which is titled The Scrapbook, about the life of Lady Jane Wilde. And you will be reading an excerpt from that book, Larry.
Is this working? Sorry to interrupt.
Yes. Yay.
Yay, good.
So Larry's going to do a little reading here first, Amelia, and then we really be ready to listen to it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. And I'll be reading a little piece from my second novel about Lady Jane Francisca Wilde, as mentioned. Wilde was a writer, poet, revolutionary, and advocate for women's rights. And she made a significant impact on 19th century Irish culture and history. But it's fair to say she may have been overshadowed just a bit by her son, Oscar. Early in her career, she wrote for a popular newspaper, The Nation, declared England as seditious and part of a group that agitated for independence. It's referred to as the Young Irelanders. She wrote under a pseudonym, Speranza, at that time. So this is where I'll begin. The demonstration organized by the Young Irelanders, which turned to an armed skirmish known as the Ballingarry Uprising. It's in the voice of Jane Wilde as a young writer. John Blake Dillon and I were introduced by William Bryan. John was known for his inspiring orations. He was about to take the stage when someone in the crowd spotted a group carrying batons and sidearms, walking cautiously but deliberately toward us on the road from Ballingarry. Someone shouted, "They're but a constabulary," which grabbed everyone's attention and created emotion. People became alarmed and blurted out questions. What business do they have here? What are they planning to do? The police unit of 45 or so officers could see that our crowd was becoming agitated and that several of our men were armed, some with rifles and some with sidearms, moved closer to the barricade, placing a more threatening barrier between us and the police. Weapons in the hands of angry locals were made ready. There was some taunting from several of our members, but we were all becoming increasingly afraid. They say that discretion is the better part of valor, you know. The constabulary in charge practiced that in part by ordering his men to veer off onto the intersection from Kilkenny, which they did while keeping their faces, weapons pointed in our direction. They seemed to be there with the intention of making peaceful arrests. Some may have even been deputized for that specific action, but they also brought loaded guns. The fear of things getting out of hand showed off on their faces just as starkly as it did on our own. The armed men in our group, having been provoked by what they saw and heard, watched nervously and cursed under breath. No doubt, like me, their senses were heightened, and for the last moment, all that each of us could hear were the field crickets, the pounding of one's heart, and rapid breathing. We could see fear on the faces of the lawmen, even though they were 100 yards away. Suddenly, 1, 2, 6, then 30 of our men jumped the barricade and ran toward the constabulary unit. The unit broke ranks and ran. They ran down the dusty road and into a field. Our menacing force chased, whooping and shouted all manner of profanity. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My heart raced. Then I didn't believe what I was doing. In an instant, I thought about the news article I was to write and began to run behind and join them. Others joined in. O'Brien, Mayor, John, other men, even a few women. This was it, and I wasn't going to miss it. You should have seen me running down the road as hard as I could to keep up, holding up my skirt enough to run, kicking up the dust. I never felt more alive. I jumped over the wall and into that unkempt pasture, nearly falling and breaking my neck. The armed men on both sides were running toward a large two-story farmhouse. I ran to keep up the low Bulgaria, sinking up to my knees in the wet slog, trying to make it to the wall with our fellows, took cover. My heart was pounding out of my chest. The constabulary unit burst into the house, front and back. They took positions at the windows. Seeing this frightening melee from her garden, the widow McCormick ran screaming to a protected position behind a stone wall adjacent to the house. Her young children were in the house, and they were now hostages. We could hear the little ones beginning to cry. Thank the good Lord, no shots had been fired yet, and none may have been fired if it were not for terrified children and their mother. Mrs. McCormick, of course, pled with leaders of our group to help get her children out. She was shaking uncontrollably. William O'Brien and the widow McCormick approached the house with hands raised and asked to speak with someone about releasing their children. I was told later that O'Brien shook a hand through the window and stated, "We are all Irishmen. Give up your guns and are free to go." I was crouched behind the wall with the others, shaking like a leaf myself when the first shot rang out. Others were fired from the house. O'Brien had to be dragged out of the line of fire, and I'm told the men who did the dragging wounded as well. Our men were incensed for being fired upon while making an attempt to free those children, so they opened fire in return. And for hours, one of our men, Thomas Walsh, was shot dead. During lulls in the shooting, we began to retreat at the range of fire. Another of our fellows, Patrick McBride, had been standing to one side of the house where it was safe. He saw us in retreat and made run for it. He too was fatally wounded as he ran to jump up and over the wall to join us. God rest their souls. A reinforcement unit of police from Kasha were seen arriving over Balea Hill. Our brave men, though running out of ammunition, tried to stop them. The reinforcements continued to advance, firing at us from up the road. It was clear that the house was impregnable, and now the constabulary numbers were overwhelming. So we ran. I never ran so hard in my life. Who was I to fool? I was running for my life. John and I circled back to our coach, running through a wooded area and crawling behind pasture walls. Old gentleman, he would take my arm and help me past any obstacle we encountered. Sadly, I didn't notice it at that time. William O'Brien and Thomas Mager were both arrested after the incident in the Commons and sent to the island of Tasmania, Australia. A report to the Lord Lieutenant of Ireland stated that the first shot came from a constable who fired at O'Brien while attempting to negotiate. Mager eventually escaped to America and led Irish-American troops in the American Civil War. John Blake Dillon left for France to avoid being caught, as did 3 of the younger members. With the loss of much of its leadership, the young islanders faded away. Me, I was never identified by the authorities, and so I was able to return to Dublin and enroll with the newspaper, an anonymous writer.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you, Catherine.
Amelia, where have you gone? Oh, you're here.
Right here.
Okay.
Ah, and it's working. Okay.
All right. So whatever you said earlier, we didn't get a word of it. So you can.
I'm so sorry about that. So I wanted to say that I got my start in traditional singing from the time I was a babe in arms. Sure, there were recorded music albums in my mom's house, but for the most part, I actually learned at house parties and concerts and from the folk singing traditional songs. So for the last 40 years or so, I've been deeply steeped in the tradition of just listening to the people who carry that tradition. Um, and of course, the song that first popped to mind for the pandemic was What Will We Do When We Have No Money? So, what will we do when we have no money? All true lovers, what will we do then? Only hawk through the town for a hungry crown, and we'll yodel it over again. What will we do if we marry a sailor? All true lovers, what will we do then? Only sail on his ships, and we'll play on his lips, and we'll yodel it over again. And what will we do if we have to marry a soldier? All true lovers, what will we do then? Only handle his gun, and we'll fight for the fun, and we'll yodel it over again. And what will we do if we marry a tinker? Oh, true lovers, what will we do then? Only mend a tin can and walk on with me, man, and we'll yodel it over again. And what will we do if we have a young daughter? Oh, true lovers, what will we do then? Only throw her on our back and walk on for the crack, and we'll yodel it over again. So what will we do if we have no money? Oh, true lovers, what will we do then? Only hawk through the town for a hungry crown, and we'll yodel it over again.
Wow. Excuse me while I get rid of the goosebumps here. Oh, that's beautiful, beautiful work. I read there's an article in the Irish Music Magazine, by the way, folks, I'll put it in the chat. I already put Amelia's website in the chat. And I noted in that you said that if you don't believe in it, you can't sing it. It has to be something that you inhabit the song. Can you speak to that just before we close out? We're going to hear you again in the second half, by the way.
Of course. I think I find something that feels true, even if the details aren't necessarily accurate. So there's an emotional resonance that feels honest when approaching any traditional song, or even the song that I wrote, which is the title track for the album. If I don't believe it, I can't bring anyone else with me into the story, right? And the hopefulness of that song about find the best of a hard situation or a challenge or a weird relationship or a place that we're vulnerable, like, I think that's the thing that makes it relevant. I think that's the thing that enables people to follow into the song and the story with you as a sort of transmission vehicle for that.
Right. We need more like you who can sing us out of this.
Yes.
One of your other tracks I was listening to, The Old Churchyard, is an 18th century American song. And that speaks to recovery in the wake of loss and tragedy. And a lot of your work is a nod to what we're trying to slough off, but yet we need to address it, inhabit it ourselves too. So thank you for helping us with that process.
Yeah, I think the album in particular, which just had its radio release in March, like I'm now officially, this album is in the top 10 Folk Alliance International list for March of 2023. So yay. But it was very much an answer to and kind of a prayer about processing this collective grief of the pandemic. And I think there is something cathartic in being able to acknowledge what we've all felt, but not really put a name to or been given space to work through or work with. So I hope to leave people lifted up on the other end of that.
Yes, we're lifted. And so in the chat, I see some people want to know how to get hold of your album, and I'm assuming through the website.
Yeah. Through the website, through Bandcamp, iTunes, it's around. It's all over the place. So
well, thank you, Amelia. What a treat. And I'm sorry I'm going to miss the second years. What are you gonna sing in the second half, so I know what I'm missing?
I had thought about kind of a dark one. But I think instead I'm going to stick with something, again, a little more uplifting, which is The Lark in the Clear Air. For
the bird ushering the spring. That sounds appropriate.
Yeah. Thank you both for inviting me to be a part of this today. So I really appreciate the chance to hear everybody's stories and yeah.
So Laurie, would you like to say anything?
I just loved your voice, and I'm also a big Joni Mitchell fan, so I understand that it's so nice to see her getting her due. I'm just curious, you said you wrote Taking Flight, and what would you say, what, because I just think that's a marvelous title. Is that more of a sad or an up, or what kind of song is Taking Flight?
I think it's about resolve. It's about communal resolve and the reminder that none of us was alone through the pandemic, that
Mhm.
none of us had to endure, even though it sort of felt that way a little bit through the isolation. We did have the internet, we did have Zoom conferences and salons,
Yeah.
and that, together movements could happen, enormous movements, and it's not up to the people who are lost. It's up to us to be a part of reaching out for that connection and that community. So raising our voices in song, I think that was the theme and the feel of that one.
Okay. I'm gonna have to look it out and listen to it. But that theme of, I read somewhere that the former pandemic, the Spanish influenza pandemic, 1918 then to 20, when it was over, people just didn't think about it and forgot about it. It was like everyone really wanted to move on. And I applaud you for wanting us to think about it and reckon with it, and see what we learn from it, as opposed to just moving on. So I think that's a beautiful theme.
Thank you. Yeah, I think catharsis is only possible when you acknowledge what has been.
Mhm.
And if
Yeah.
you don't have a moment to do that, then you kind of carry the effects of it without actually being able to name or work through or sort through any of what actually occurred. Like, I've lost over 63 different people that I've known and loved my whole life because of the folk music tradition, right? A lot of older generations, delayed medical care, the pandemic itself,
Yeah.
things exacerbated by the pandemic, right?
Mm.
And I needed a place to put that. And so if it's helpful for me, maybe it's
A
lovely.
comfort for others. Yes. Thank you. Well,
Thank you, everybody. I'm gonna cut out. Thank you all so much.
Yes, and we are, thank you again, Amelia. We're going to be on a bit of a break. This is a time that usually 5-10 minutes we chat. If people get up, need to get some water, need to go to the restroom. And we should be back with 17 after, so probably at 27 after. And good luck to you, Catherine, and drive safely over the bridge. And Amelia, you're going to sing us out again, right? That's what okay. So we'll have a bit of a shorter, but so that's where we're at. Yeah. And I'm so looking forward to it. I was curious about Jim, your because now it's time to chat. So if anyone has any questions for any of the writers, or if anyone's, this is a time you can come and go, but I was really intrigued by Jim's description of Luke. I was really feeling bad for poor Luke.
Well, my wife challenged me to somewhere in this third mystery book include a hunting scene, because the first book, Coldwater Revenge, has a fishing scene where Luke, the young boy in both books, catches a salmon that's as big as he is, and so on and so forth. And she said, the outdoors, hunting, fishing, etc., is such a big part of your life, and you're able to capture that, so you really owe it to yourself before you finish this series to have a scene like that. And I kind of ignored the suggestion, didn't fit with the plot, and I've come late in life to hunting. It was one time when I was much younger when I couldn't even stand the idea. So I didn't do it for the longest time, but then when I finally sat down and did it, it was the opening to the mystery of the third book. Because of course, Luke did not shoot his dad. And part of the mystery involves figuring out who else was in the woods at that time, and who did it. So anyway, well, that's the background. I hope it's enough of a hook to inspire people, if not to buy the book, at least to turn the page to find out what happened.
Next to it.
Chapter 2, as they stand there in Barnes and Noble reading, hoping nobody interrupts them.
Is there much hunting and hunting Teddy Roosevelt? And do you end up catching him? Don't give away the ending of the book.
There's a lot of hunting and hunting Teddy Roosevelt. It's a book that takes place on safari in Africa. Safari led by former President Roosevelt when he left office after his second term, and he had to make a living. So he signed a contract with Colliers to lead a safari to collect game specimens for the Smithsonian, the New York Museum of Natural History, and write a realized version of the safari, and later collected into a book. So there's quite a bit of hunting in that book.
All right.
I want to give a little shout out to Jim. I read Hunting Teddy Roosevelt, and I'm working on Coldwater Confession. And enjoy it very much. Yeah.
Well,
Also,
thank you, Larry.
I wanted to mention that Jim from time to time takes my calls and talks to me about writing, and he's been a bit of a coach, and I appreciate Jim. I think that's a great way for members to support each other in this organization, and Jim has provided that kind of stuff for me. So thank you, Jim.
Well, I appreciate the shout out, Larry. My view is that we have a unique opportunity as artists to help each other because we're not competitors, albeit we're in the same field. Nobody is going to not buy a book by Jim Ross in order to buy a book by Larry McLaughlin. They're either going to buy one, the other, or both, but they're not compete. We tap into the same audience, but we don't compete for it. So it's a wonderful thing that we can do to support each other and, pass along writing tips or plotting tips or, names of agents or publishers and, the basic blocking and tackling of getting this thing that's inside you out to an audience who might want to hear about it. So I'm absolutely happy to do that. And I appreciate it when others do the same for me.
Yeah, that's good.
Larry, is there going to be another workshop in Ireland this summer?
Well, there will be. They're putting together right now, and I'm not sure if we will be a part of it. We did a workshop with the Dingle Literary Festival, which resumed last November after COVID. It had some, I think, some Zoom sessions over the past few years, but they got together. It was a successful event, and we did I put together a little team, did a workshop on writing history and historical fiction, and put together some resources to share with workshop participants that people can access at no cost. I tell you, I'd be happy to share that with the group, and I'll do that first by sending it to you, Brandon. And it's a compilation of resources that everyone can access at no cost from very credible sources on Irish history, from ancient times to modern times. And it's all available through the digitization efforts that are underway, throughout the country, mainly by universities. But there's quite a few on there, and I'd be happy to share it. And I'll do that through Brendan.
Okay, you can also, if you want, just post it on the. I mean, is it all? It's a bunch of different websites, or is it all?
Is.
On the website?
It's
okay.
all compiled with descriptions in a PDF, and so there's no one place to get that except by getting it on paper.
Okay, very good, cool. Yeah, it's an interesting. I think everybody's pieces in here have touched on different things that have been stuff that we've been involved with recently. And Victoria, you were talking about in your novel the research and stuff that you've been doing or that you had done, not just about, exploring family history and everything. Actually it was in December, we did a partnership with the African American Irish Diaspora Network,
Oh,
which is a thing, and they're a great organization. And we did an online seminar and writing workshop with in conjunction with them and with one of the genealogy services. I forget whether it was ancestry.com. And then we had a workshop with Terry Ellen Cross Davis, who was the Folger Shakespeare Library poetry coordinator. And we had a panel of several different poets and genealogists, including Paula Meehan, the Irish poet, and just talking about the idea of using your own family genealogical research as a resource or as an inspiration for your own writing. And it was very compelling. It was very interesting. We're hopefully going to do something. We're hopefully going to be doing something again with the African American Irish Diaspora Network. But that is a thing, and it has, again, it's something that has become very popular. The whole idea of like people getting into their researching their family or their history, which hasn't always been something of interest to people in general, but particularly Irish Americans. We recently, if you go to our website, you can find a link to an interview I did with Peter Quinn, who was the first president of Irish American Writers and Artists, and he his first novel called The Banished Children of Eve, which was about the draft riots in New York in 1864. And he talked a lot about the interview covers a lot of different stuff, including a lot of stuff about the Bronx, because his latest book is called Cross Bronx, and it's his life growing up in the Bronx, and a lot of interesting stuff in there. But he talked about the idea that until sometime in like the mid to late 20th century, Irish Americans didn't have that strong of an interest in researching and going back into their own history. And everything was about facing forward, almost like that Biden's nostalgia for the future idea, which also reminds me of a book title. And sadly, I actually never read the book, but about Russia in like the late, or I guess in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, like post Glasnost. And the title of the book was Let's Put the Future Behind Us, which is kind of like a thing that I think certainly, there's been a big trend or there had been a big trend in, I think partly in Irish life, and particularly I think in people dealing with family life and particularly like generational trauma, right? Which is the idea of like, that's all in the past and that is sealed up and we're going to forget about that ever happened. We're going to put it in a,
because of that,
Talk about it.
because of that, and there were lots of things that you just couldn't talk about or shouldn't talk about. And my father was a NYPD Bronx, and I didn't know any of his secrets particularly about that role. But when I was tying together 3 generations in my novel, I sort of thought, well, what if? And especially when I discovered the role, I had no idea of the American IRA support during the Troubles, and the fact that some like 90%, might be somewhere between 70 and 90% of the weapons for the IRA came by way of Baltimore, New York, and Philadelphia, and over in ships and in nuns' suitcases and all those things that are in fact true. And that, so it was an irresistible storyline. And of course, the NYPD and the longshoremen made that happen. And, that you could do a lot with that storyline. And I sort of did my version of it. And, I don't think there's anybody who is still willing to talk that much about all of that but it is there as kind of secret history.
Yeah.
Can
Oh,
I
the
just
Irish and our
add to
secrets.
the conversation?
What's that?
May I add to the conversation?
Yeah.
Just on the family, writing about family, I started writing about my family in Inchigeela. So Larry, I was interested in your Ballingeary. I've actually went to get the Gaeltacht when I was 14, 15 for 2 separate years to Ballingeary for the summer for a month each time. I'm from Cork, if you haven't got my accent so far. But Joe Creedon there in the hotel, the Creedon's Hotel, have you popped into him for his history and storytelling? Because he does a great job in sharing.
No, I haven't, but I would love to do something like that. I'm trying to make those kinds of connections, Rosaline, and
Well,
yeah.
Joe, I took my son and his wife back in January, and Joe gave us 2 full hours of singing. I shared my poems. He shared family verses from a granduncle. He told stories. He's the most wonderful contributor to, the local knowledge there in Inchigeela. He'd give you anybody he would give time to, but he's just, very, very kind to me with giving me space and time to share stories. So I just wanted to share that with you guys.
Well, Rosaline, if you wouldn't mind putting your email address in the chat for me, I'd love to connect with you about that more.
For sure.
I know the Irish and their stories, so I think I'd like to rein us back in because I'm looking at the time. And the next story will be from Alex, who's going to be featuring an actor who is an Irishman who's going to be telling a story. And I'm finding out from Alex earlier that it's that this actor is nominated for an award due to Alex's movie. So let me introduce Alex. He's a playwright, screenwriter, a monologist, and on his website, he has wonderful films of his storytelling that I recommend people to check out. And he's a writer of short stories. On his website, he writes, "This is what I do. I act and I write, and I write and I act. I have dedicated my life to the word." Well, now it's more than the word that he's dedicated his life. He's made this wonderful short feature film that's a bit noir. I call it, it's a bit dark, but it is so great. And I'd like to introduce, I'm a little sad because he moved out of Alameda. He used to live here in Alameda. Now he's in Pasadena, but another West Coaster. I'd like to introduce Alex Adams.
How do you do, everyone? And I'd like to introduce my wife, who was the director of this film, and she directed Alan and Alan and Diana and myself were good friends. So it was a great experience. We had 2 days. We had to do this film at the Radio Museum, and we finished it. And the producer was also from our apartment complex. So the whole thing is an Alameda project in that way. So I'd like to tip my hat again to Alameda, and sorry we had to leave, but anyway, I'm glad to be here. And without further ado, it's been a hell of a lot of time to present the movie. Up to 7 minutes, is it? I think it is. So it'll just end when about halfway into the movie, but I think there's enough said. So I'll let it go. Are you, are you there? Yeah, go ahead. Oh, there we go.
Hello, Jim. apparently, since Jim's light is off the board, he's left us. So have all the other callers. Oh, thank God I have my generator. I can still be on air. Well, I'll just continue. There's an FCC law that you can't have dead air on the radio. Oh, dead air. Or dead bodies. Jim, if you can hear me, stop reading that slop. Oh, let me explain, dear listeners. Jim was quoting from some slanderous accusations made by a news service called Juicy Tidbits. Juicy Tidbits wrote about an incident in church yesterday when Peter Pine, a reputable businessman and devout Catholic, collapsed after he received the Eucharist at my parish. Well, first, let me say that Peter is unfortunately, fortunately, only temporarily unconscious. Yeah, sure, now I know in the past that the Catholic Church tried to poison the great philosopher Descartes for blasphemy by lacing his wafer with cyanide. But where do you get cyanide on a Saturday night? Yes, these things have happened. But now the police claim that someone put rat poison on Peter Pine's Eucharist. Rat poison? In all my years at the parish, I'd never even seen a mere mouse, let alone a rat. Ooh, how sickening. And how deplorable that my reputable name would be dragged through the mud like this, and at a time like this. Maybe it's time to pray our way through this hurricane with WGOD radio. WGOD radio all night, all day, all pray. WGOD radio all the way. Lord, please give us the insight and the heart to lead us through this destructive storm. While I have your ear, Lord, could you see to it that I get a fair shake from the press? For as you know, I'm only trying to serve you, God, and your lovely Son, Jesus Christ Almighty. Amen. Now, as far as I'm concerned, Juicy Tidbits is just an out-and-out gossip rag, edited by a tempestuous harlot. But it seems the Vatican reads this gossip rag and takes whatever it says as the gospel truth. In fact, according to my inside sources at the Vatican Secret Service, this accusation from Juicy Tidbits created an explosion at the office. The nuncio, who makes recommendations to the Pope, was knocked right off his seat when he read this Juicy Tidbits newsflash on the internet. But why such an extreme reaction? Well, just before he read this slanderous tidbit from Juicy Tidbits, the nuncio had recommended me to the Pope to become the next bishop of my area. That's right, folks. The nuncio recommended me, Father Robert Boyle, once a scrappy little urchin from the slums of Dublin, to become a bishop in America. Still no lights on the board. You see, we have a generator that kicks in if the hurricane hits us, so we can keep talking. But if your power's out, dear listener, and this is so much sound and fury, signifying WGOD radio. Now, where was I? Oh, yeah, the nuncio. Now, since great minds think alike, the nuncio wanted Catholic priests like me to campaign against celibacy and to help reform the church. In fact, He even said, and I quote, Father Robert Boyan is an up-and-comer on the fast track of progressive ideas. I think all like-minded Catholics should sign his petition. It is, after all, a 2050, and I think it is about time we try to keep up with other religions. Well, that's why I wanted priests to be able to marry and to have children like they do in other religions. I mean, even Lutheran priests spawn off at least a half a dozen. And there are Baptist ministers who populated whole towns in the south. And don't even get me started on the Mormons. But who among us would call any of these priests anarchists just because they want to get married? Not me, or the nuncio. We both saw this problem eye to eye. What did Scott Fitzgerald?
Sorry about that. Oh, you're not muted.
Yeah. There we go. I would like to say if anyone wants to see the rest of it, they can.
We'll put the link in the chat.
Yeah, we'll put the link on the chat, and you can finish it off because obviously you see it. We're halfway through it, and he gets drunker, and the storm gets worse.
He gets drunker and drunker. What happens, and I understand why you told me that he was nominated for acting, because it's a solo piece and it's brilliant. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
It really is.
And Diana and Alan were working, and the cameraman. I could not be present because the space is so small. It's a recording studio, so I had to only watch it from the outside. So they worked very intensely and very closely together to get that effect. But we were really pleased to do it in 2 days. I'd love to hear from Pat, because she's also got her movie. And
the two of you are like kind of going neck and neck with two different ones, a feature and yours is a short. Now, did you use, what kind of camera did you use? She used her iPhone. What did you?
All sorts of camera. As I say, I wasn't there. I couldn't. They couldn't come in, so and nobody wants a writer on set anyway. Well, yeah, maybe that effect, Pat. But anyway, they use all sorts of different cameras and whatever for this, and also microphones. I don't know if you noticed, when he's praying, that microphone sounds kind of like a little mic would sound. It's kind of got this crinkly sound. So things like that. And
well, Alex, I can't wait to see the rest, because it's very compelling and weird and dark. Just everything I love.
Yeah, me too. See.
Good work.
Yeah, so we'll put the whole thing on, and you also keep in mind when it's going through the airwaves. I notice sometimes things, freeze, and then you hear them talking or whatever. But that's not really how you see it on the film. But anyway, this is it did a great job in putting it through the air, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, and thank you, because you are a big supporter of this film.
Yes, I am. I don't know your wife's name, because we should introduce her, the director. Diana.
Yes. Hi.
Hi, Diana. I know when the first time I saw this, you were there, and there was that group of all filmmakers here in the Bay Area, and you and have you directed other features, or it was great job.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a really exciting collaboration with Alex. Someone else was speaking to doing work during the pandemic, and this was something Alex had originally conceived of as a Zoom solo play that he was going to do. So I think so much creativity came from.
So he was originally going to be the actor? Yeah,
in the Zoom version.
Well, this was for, as another member mentioned, the Moth, which is a place in Berkeley that do
Marsh.
The Marsh. I'm sorry, the Moth. Sorry. Yes. Anyway, I was supposed to do it, and Diana was directing me in that, and I got COVID, so I couldn't even talk, and since then my voice has never been the same. So we had this kind of hanging around, and then we thought, why don't we get Alan to do it? And then all of a sudden we thought of the film festivals and stuff like that. And I called up the radio station, and one thing led to the other. So that's kind of how it all came about. But Diana's a great actress, who that's why we're here in Pasadena, because she wants to be closer to the studios. And so that's
Yeah.
but it's exciting to be here, and I know she'll do well.
Yes, yeah, congratulations. And I'm wishing you both on, and I want to be watching how this short progresses, because it's this is the year that you'll be submitting it to all the different.
Yeah. Oakland was one of the first places, so so we'll just.
Have you submitted it to the Alameda International Festival? Because
We did. We weren't selected this time, but I still am very fond of the work that the two of them are doing, Mark and Colin, right? And how they go festival from that small parking lot to, I mean, I can't imagine how much dedication it takes to make something grow. So
a lot, yeah.
We got in the last, I think when you, they give you a submission day at the end, say, very last time and stuff. I don't even think at that time they really, they even look at it, because it's just something they put out there. But I know this happens with other film festivals too. When they give you a last deadline, it doesn't even count. So anyway. But Oakland came in first. We submitted it right away, and that was good. But we also have other submission dates. In fact, right here in there's the Rose Film Festival, and we just learned somebody the other day, so we're going to submit to that. So
yesterday in the on the new the Irish Echo newsletter, they were announcing that Chicago is having an Irish American Film Festival, and I can email you that contact, because they were saying they didn't have enough submissions.
Oh, yeah. I'm from Chicago. I'm from Chicago, and in fact, my mother is the Irish part of me. Her name is O'Malley, and I'm actually related to Grace O'Malley. And the reason I know that, or I don't know it, but my two uncles did research on it, and they say we're related to her. Probably,
is that the pirate, the Irish pirate, the woman?
Pirate, yeah.
Pirate. So, there's a film.
And actually, there was a musical on Broadway, The Dancing or something, but didn't do very well. But and there's a children's book about her, so go figure. Wait, there are two plays right now that I know of that were written during the COVID that are. And if anyone's a playwright in this group, and I know there are, there's a thing called Playwrights Binge. And it's for playwrights, and it tells you what festivals are going on and so on and so forth. And through that festival, I found out there are two plays written about Grace O'Malley, just out there. So anyway, that's
Alex, this was great. Thank you. And Diana, lovely seeing you again, and best of luck. Really, best of luck.
It's been a lot of fun. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. Now I'm waiting to go to Catherine, but no, it's me again. So I'd like to introduce our next reader is Matt Davison, Irish American poet, actor, playwright, veterans advocate, and he's living in California in San Pedro. And he's going to be reading from his work, Lost and Found. And on this work, the preface reads, lost in the fog of dual addictions, veteran, drifter, poet, here, there, and everywhere, man. Found, though, through love received. Helping veterans in need, encouraged by Tennessee and Richard, guess their characters, 5 decades clean and sober. The fog has lifted. Matt?
Okay. I'd like to read just a segment from the first essay of this book, Lost and Found, which is not only found at Barnes and Noble, it's found in the library of the University of Cork. And so I'll begin with the first segment, and I call it Found. Killeen Castle Hill was a journey back in time, not far from Ballina, County Mayo, in the rugged west of Ireland, the rural region considered mostly of farms, lakes. En route to Kate and Pat's house, my cab was delayed as a farmer drove his herd of sheep across the road. It was a good opportunity for the locals to find out who this stranger was and where was he destined to. Upon arriving at the humble cottage of Great Aunt Kate and Pat, the cab driver insisted that he break the news of his passenger as so not to shock the old ones. I watched Kate run out of the cottage shouting, "You're fooling me." I presented her with a cake that I picked up in Ballina, and she embraced me, and the postman followed us inside for a cup of tea. Soon Pat returned from tending his cows. It wasn't fancy by any means, but this was the warmest welcome I had ever experienced. We decided to take the party to Westport. Pat washed up, Kate put on her best dress, and we were off. And it was a grand night of dancing, singing rebel songs, and Irish whiskey consumption. At the end of it all, Pat dropped me at my hotel, and we promised to meet the next day for lunch. I woke late to the sound of rain. I dressed quickly in the unheated room and sat by the lobby fireplace waiting for my cab. This would be my last day at Killeen, Castle Hill. The next morning, I'd catch the train back to Dublin and return flight to New York. Transportation had almost eaten up my severance pay, and I simply couldn't afford to stay on as long as I would have liked. I had the distinct feeling that I lived here before. It was a comfortable feeling of familiarity. The people were warm, easy to talk with, and surprised to know that I was an American. This was because, among other things, I had no camera hanging around my neck. I looked like one of them. I felt like one of them. We were all poets. The cab announced a presence with the honking of his horn, and we were off. It was the same driver I had the day before, and we spoke easily along the way. Kate's daughter, son-in-law, and infant grandson were already in the cottage. The kitchen was a din of activity. It would be a while before lunch. Pat offered a drink, but I declined, having not yet recovered from the night before. I asked how far it was to the sea, feeling in need of fresh air and some exercise. Pat said I would have to take the bus and walk a mile or so. I promised I would be back soon. I left for the bus stop. The wind picked up dramatically as I approached the sea. It was dark and misty. What few brave souls were out walking had to hold on to the fences so as not to be blown away. Every now and then I'd hear someone say, "It's wild, isn't it?" I stopped near the sea, transfixed by the crashing and the spraying of waves moving in rapid succession. What follows defies any earthly explanation. A feeling of warmth fell over me. My hands stopped shaking, and I was overcome by a peace I'd never known. In this howling of the wind, crashing of the sea, I could hear my mother promise me her prayers. Through the mist, I saw a figure standing where there was no path. The figure waved and was gone as the mist thickened. I don't know how long I stood there, but by the time I arrived back in the cottage, I was soaked through and through, and lunch was waiting. Pat asked me where I had been. I told him, explaining the physical nature of the area. His head dropped and his eyes filled with tears. In a breaking voice, he told me that it was there where his only son had drowned some years ago. Well, he did not know it then. It would be the place where his grandson would drown as well. Kate offered me a drink to warm myself. I said no and took some tea instead. And that was many years ago. Kate and Pat are gone now, as is my mother, although she did live just long enough to see her son at peace and freed from whatever it was that tormented him. It wasn't medical treatment or the worthwhile endeavors of Alcoholics Anonymous that took away the need for drugs and alcohol. It was the gift of grace. The prayers of a dying lady turned me away from a sure early death and toward a life of fulfillment and love. I didn't know it then, but I know it now with all of my heart. There is no end to this story. I feel my mother's presence in every passing day. I read of others who are mysteriously healed in the face of certain deaths without scientific explanation, and I know I am not alone. An addicted poet died that day at Enniscrone Beach near Sligo Sea, and another soul much wiser emerged in his place to bear witness, to carry on. And that's my story.
Beautiful, beautiful. That's pretty, very powerful, very, very moving. And there are just so many moments of that have just captured my imagination of that vision in the rain, and knowing that was vision of a ghost, but that ghost changed your life. And that was the fog lifting. I guess that's what you talked about, the coming out of the fog. That's the fog.
Exactly. It's a true story.
Is it?
And that's what makes it more amazing.
Yeah.
Really beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, there were just so many moments. Yeah, no, we've talked about goosebumps before. I have them right now because the vividness of the writing and it was just so moving, and having that life-changing moment that continued life, to get out of that fog of, and it sounded like, from when I read your intro, was that you also shared that gift, helping others get out of the fog with the veterans.
Oh, yes. I belong to a group called Operation Confidence, and they're on YouTube. And I've worked with veterans for 16 years. These are the homeless, disabled, incarcerated veterans. And I help them, once they're out of prison, to find employment, housing, healthcare, whatever they need. And it's been the most rewarding work that I've ever done. And I've had other jobs in acting, and was a creative director at J. Walter Thompson for a while. But none of that meant anything. It was working with the veterans that meant everything. And I still love doing it, and I do it as much as I can.
Well, it takes someone from you who's gotten out of the fog to help other people get out of the fog.
Exactly, exactly that. Yes. Yeah.
There was something moving. There was the line, "We were all poets," and recognizing the poets of everyone that in there, everyone
right.
home in them. I just love that line.
Everybody here on the show is poets.
Yes, very true, very true. And Enniscrone is where my nan is from, in Ireland. So I was like,
Enniscrone. Oh, Enniscrone Beach, yes.
Yeah, I was there. So.
Oh, you were?
Yeah, no, my nan is from Enniscrone.
Oh, darned.
Yeah.
Well, my cousin John.
Yeah.
My cousin John lives in Dublin, but he spent a lot of time at Enniskillen Beach. So he knows too,
Mhm.
tells me about it. But he lost his brother Aiden after Pat's son was lost, drowned. Same place. Incredible.
Yeah, it's incredible. It is really very incredible. So thank you. It's just,
Thank
you
you.
never know how a salon, sometimes a salon has a theme, and I think there's this theme of being back in Ireland, when those who can, and finding that there's something you didn't know that there was a connection, but there was a connection. I think we started with Victoria sharing something like that, and it's sort of like a little through line that's coming through. So I'd like to now move on to Christine McAvoy Derico is a lawyer, podcaster, and author poised for publication of her 2 detective novels in planned series based upon a true crime. She is working towards her MA at Middlebury College Breadloaf School of English, and her current independent writing project focuses on Irish orphan Alice Mealy, also based on true events set in the early 20th century. Welcome, Christy.
Hi, thank you for having me. So I'm going to read from an excerpt from the first chapter in Alice Mealy's book, which is based on her true story. Alice Mealy was an inveterate liar, or at least that's what they said. But what some considered a lie, Alberta considered a version of herself. One such version had her born in the green pastures of Ireland to poor yet loving parents who had since died at the hands of the consumption, at which stage she had been surrendered into the care of a foster mother, the wicked Mrs. Gill. The account was often told with the lilt of the old country, with Alberta's black boots joining ranks with the hundreds of thousands of other Irish deposited on the shores of New York due to the waves of the potato famine, all at the hands of the blasted English. In certain quarters of the city, to fend off the tidal wave of downtrodden newcomers, they were repelled by signs when seeking work. No dogs or Irish need apply. But even Alberta's imaginative fable had limits. She made sure to distinguish her lot from the gangs like the Dead Rabbits, Plug Uglies, or the Bowery Boys, who lorded over the Bowery's 5 corners, among the hordes who lived in Lower Manhattan, with short lives and uncertain futures, crowded into timber-rotted tenements. No, she made clear that her imagined kinfolk were of East Harlem stock, where they settled with their clan, some just off the boat, tethered by blood, country, and marriage, through distant aunts, uncles, and cousins, all barely surviving but watching each other's backs just the same. Oh, there were others in the group, like the Germans, and of course a few English, but mainly they were Irish, many blocks and many worlds north of the slattern lot, who came alive after nightfall in the beer gardens, concert saloons, dance halls, and theaters of the Bowery, where the socially passable rubbed shoulders with the soulless. Yet another version of Alberta as a 15-year-old girl, more childlike than woman, of hair black and eyes thin, of medium height, receiving a lashing for some petty crime like shoplifting, now reported missing. Last seen wearing a brown dress, red tam o' shanter hat, blue coat, and black shoes and stockings, in the company of Maggie O'Donnell, also 15. That Alberta was American born, but surely not more than first generation, with roots in Philly and Boston, abandoned in New York, labeled a half orphan, sometimes a full. But though that history of events might have touches of the truer one, there were some unfortunate facts Alberta was most inclined to omit, namely how and when she became ruined and at what age and by whom. She also willingly omitted or purposely forgot the name of her mother, although others called the woman who carried her and birthed her as Bertie, maybe due to her last name Burns or some variant of her Christian name Marcella. There was also her father, the name she never discussed, one Thomas Mealy, a shadowy figure who might approach Alberta on the street with a "How goes it, Bertie?" causing her to jump before she warmed in recognition of his drawn face and mouth, with one less tooth than the last time she'd seen him, allowing a girlish fantasy to enter her mind that he had finally come to save her, and that she was only a half orphan, would be brought home and no longer be a boarder servant, but a real daughter. These imaginations filled her with hope right before Thomas would flit off again with a smiling wave of a hand and another floozy who promised him a good time and a drink, on her, of course. And yet, even that version might have been a lie, because records indicate that Thomas mainly resided in the 5th District Prison in Manhattan due to one drunken disturbance of the peace or another. So it was a truth or a lie that she confessed with nigh a tear her ruination to Officer Pissarra that blizzarding January in 1906, alleging her ruination at the hands of her foster mother's husband some 5 years before. That declaration becoming her damnation and her salvation. With a shake of the head, the officer scribbled notes as Alice prattled, then grabbed her by the arm as he pulled her off downtown. Days later, she found herself in children's court. Alberta had perched herself on the wooden bench, covering her embarrassment by fidgeting with the treasure she always carried in her voluminous pockets, trying to ignore the raucous drunken voices in different languages that cursed and shouted around her with their grubby faces and unkempt hair of all shades, from dark brown like hers to blonde or ginger, a ragtag group of mostly Irish, again with some German and Italians mixed in. The room buzzed with tension, not unlike the atmosphere amid the vendors on Mulberry Street, all fighting to get a sale. So this story is based on true events. Alice marries an Englishman who claims to have family on the Titanic, and this is her story.
Wow. It's very incredible. You're writing it really like from the very beginning, you know, what is the true version of herself? She has versions of herself and it seems like as life goes on, she creates new versions because she gets married someone who was on the Titanic, and there's another version, but what is the true version? And it sounds like it's probably so harsh and hard that you don't really want to think about the true version. So don't we all make new versions when it gets hard? But Christy, very, very, very moving, very moving. Is this complete? This is a finished book.
I'm about 5 chapters in, and this is my project now. I needed to spit it out and feel what people felt. Alice was sentenced to the Sisters of the Good Shepherd, which was on East 90th, which is an amazing story in and of themselves. And even though there's so much bad said about nuns and reformatories, I actually feel that they did an immense amount of good, especially with the tidal wave of immigration that was going on, and children with no parents. I mean, what else could you do? And I found an account written by, I think it's Kathleen Connolly, sanctioned by the Archdiocese, about the Sisters of the Good Shepherd, written exactly the time she was committed. And it's amazing. I mean, everyone in this room knows how the relationship between the church and clergy and, you know, nuns and priests, and it's always glowing. But it allows you to dream that there may not have been a lot of beatings, and that you could have a little orphan Annie in a good way. So that's the story.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's a very powerful one, because orphanage was, if you were on the streets, the orphanage was the best place to go. And many times. Huh. Wow.
So, but I hear lots of meeting everyone tonight. it's amazing how many stories, there's so many parts of the city that the Irish lived in, and we migrated north and south and all over the place. But her people were from East Harlem that then became Italian. And, there's the Inwood, I read that book, and this is
Yeah.
great.
Right. We talked about Peter Quinn talking about the Bronx, and your description of the city was really very vivid. I really did enjoy it when you talked about the Bowery and the different things. I could visualize it, and I thought that was very, very powerful and moving. And they all came from one little Ireland, but where all around in the world, the diaspora is just so amazing. Where the Irish has gone, and the heritage of storytelling and love of music and love of arts is, I think, why we're all here together. So, Christy, are you located on the East Coast? Where are you?
I am in Westchester County, just north of the city, and yes.
Yonkers? I'm sorry.
No, my daughter's in Yonkers, but I'm in Mamaroneck, and I'm also, as a lawyer, I found learning about the children's courts and how the courts function then fascinating.
Yeah.
We don't really have a different, and you were talking about the waves of immigrants now, and I wrote down that quote, I'm up, pull up the ladder, I'm up, pull the ladder up. It really gave me pause, because it was a time when very similar to what we're in now, with a lot of unattended minors and people in terrible poverty. And what do you do? So I really appreciate that it started that way. And this is a story about an orphan. That's the point, that she's an orphan.
Yeah. Yeah. Christy, thank you. Really.
Thank you.
And we're going to have a reprise of Amelia, and I'm going to ask Amelia if she could pronounce the word, the old style. It's called chanus, chanos. One of the things I was looking at, it's called old style. She sings Irish music in chanos. How do you pronounce that? And then I really also love one of the very first salons I did. I had a 14-year-old fiddle player, and she shared in such an eloquent way that her teacher learned all these fiddle tunes from a grandfather in Ireland. And she said at 14, so wisely, and it's going to be my role to share these same songs with the future generation. And I just think that you embody that in what you were, in what you sing, and keeping that old style, but making sure that you've captured it, or you've got as much as you can, because this generation passed a little too soon due to COVID, and you're going to make sure that others learn it. That's what I sense from you. So, Amelia, how do you pronounce chanus?
Shannos is how it's.
Shanos. Okay.
Yeah, Shannos, like so Shan, the name Shan, had like where you put the fada, the little accent over the L's, will change the way that they're pronounced, and often the meanings of the terms. There will be subtle shifts in what the context is, of course, in where the words fall. But Shannos is old style. And that's a style of music that's fairly uncommon. It's not a style, like, it's not the kind of thing you mostly hear on the big stages, right? You have the big Irish rock bands and like the Pogues or anything. That's not really what they do. And it's when you transmit a song, you are saying a song, is the way that it's sort of thought of, rather than sort of done at someone. You're sort of with the listening. It's like a conversation, right? So it's a very close-knit way of communicating a story that has room for the story to be kind of almost alive in and of itself. And that's one of the markers. Is it's often unaccompanied. It's often a solo voice, like a singular melodic thread. And it's got room to breathe rhythmically, right? little space so the sun can shine through, as my friend likes to say. And you'd mostly do this at house parties or at sessions, singing sessions, or like around a close fire. The whole pub quiets when one of these starts. And it's not really the rockin' chorus drinking songs. It's just a very singular kind of its own style of music.
Intimate, almost very intimate.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so if you there's some sort of conventions that will follow, but like different styles of Shanno singing will carry some of those conventions differently. And when people have come in, like song collectors, to jot down in Western musical notation, they'll often include the grace notes, but the grace notes aren't really a part of the core of the song or tune. They're specific to that musician and that singer.
Mm.
It's their way of making it theirs.
Personal, yeah.
So it's not supposed to be exactly the same every single time you sing it or say it or play it.
Yeah.
Because it's alive, right?
It's alive. Thank you. Thank you. What's
So I think I want to kind of finish out with one. I thought for a moment I was going to do a super Irishy Irish one, but I think I'm actually going to do a Cornish song instead, written by a friend named Roger Bryant, and he got this from graffiti he found in Cornwall. And on my album, I have it played accompanied with a Ray Frank plays an 1886 Washburn banjo, original Washburn banjo, that he strung with fishing wire. And so that's one of those quirky things about recording, is you kind of get to do some unusual stuff. But right now I have what they call a Shruti box, which I can kind of show through the camera, but it's like a keyless harmonium, so you can only play a drone or a chord, right? From Newley Town we used to sail through rain and mist and lashing gale. The mackerel shoals we'd hoped to find, and soon we'd left Land's End behind. We'd searched the 7 stones around, but not a sign nor shoal was found. Round Island Light is now in sight, but Scilly's are a barren ground. For Cornish lads are fishermen, and Cornish lads are miners too. But when the fish and tin are gone, what are those Cornish boys to do? The winding engines used to sing a melody of Cornish tin, and Geever lads they all would grin at payday on a Friday. But the water now reclaims the mine, and young men talk of old men's time, and go to work in gold or coal, or face life upon the dole. For Cornish lads are fishermen, and Cornish lads are miners too. But when all fish and tin are gone, what are those The hammer of the auction man is the only sound you soon will hear, and visitors will make their noise and order drinks by Cornish boys. So we'll do as we have done before, go out and roam the wild world o'er, wherever seas or ships are found, or there's a hold dog underground. For Cornish lads are fishermen, and Cornish lads are miners too. And when all fish and tin are gone, that's what the Cornish boys will do.
Amelia, thank you so much, and thank you. I've learned a lesson. A song is a living, breathing thing, and it can change by just the atmosphere around and just the group that it's in, and just I just love thinking of it that way. And I just love so many things that were said tonight. One from Matt, we are all poets, and we are all artists, and we are all writers, and we are all filmmakers, and we are all storytellers, because we all have stories. And it was just a glorious, glorious salon. And I am, it sort of met and went beyond my expectations. And Amelia, thank you for gracing us out both times and both halves. And I am going to ask Brendan, do we have someone else joining us?
Yes, indeed. We just need him to turn his camera on. But I think you can hear us, Maliki, if you're out there. Let's see. Can you hear me, Maliki?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Your camera is off at the moment.
I can't seem to bring my image up. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. You don't need to see my face.
Let's see your lovely face.
Oh, thank you very much, Lord. I'm on, am I?
You're on by audio, but sadly not on video yet.
Let's see. Oh, if I start video.
There we go. There we go. All
That's
right.
what it said. Start video. And I should know the English language by now and understand this. Well, my dear man, Brendan, once more you have pulled together a major production.
Well,
Every time it's like producing off Broadway. I don't know how you do it, but you bring in people from all over the world. So thank you so much for doing that.
It was Lori really and Catherine who put everybody together tonight.
Good. Thank you, Lori. And it was good to see you on Sunday.
Yes, it was great seeing you Sunday. Yes.
My canonization. The Church of the Stop Shopping Church and the Earth Stop Shopping Church and the Stop Shopping Choir. And it was, and then I don't know if I'm the first canonization. I believe I am St. Malachy. But there was a guy named St. Malachy, and there was an Irish saint named St. Malachy, 7th century or thereabouts. But they forgot all about him, and now it's left to me to carry on sainthood. I am, as they say, an atheist, thank God. And that leaves me, and people wonder, how can you be an atheist and then thank God? Well, you can, because people say, oh, you don't believe in anything. That's not true. I believe in everything. I believe in the sunshine, the sunset. I believe in the breeze, the sight of a river. And I believe in goodness of people. I believe I'm aware there's some evil too, but I choose to ignore that. And it's, so I believe, that's it. And I'm not sure about, I wasn't sure about what I was going to say today, but that sainthood that was conferred on me on Sunday was an astonishing feat. And I don't know what one does when one is made a saint. I understand in the Catholic Church, as I remember, you have to perform 2 or 3 miracles. And I don't know. The only way, I think the miracles that have happened is that I found somebody that I've been married to for 60 years, and I found love. Didn't they? People in Ireland would laugh at you if you say you love somebody. That's silly. And I'm in love after 60 years. I have wonderful children and 9 grandchildren. And then I have Irish writers. I love you. Thank you so much. It was a brilliant assembly this evening. And Laurie, thank you so much for your most eloquent and gracious.
Make yours louder.
Excuse me, Maliki, I'm sorry to interrupt. It sounds like your audio is being blocked. Like, is the phone or the iPad behind something or on a pillow?
Oh, I see. I put my hand up. Is that it?
There you go.
Yeah,
Much better.
So I'm on the iPad. I covered the back of it here. I'm lying in bed, and it, as opposed to lying in a bar. But anyway, it was getting that sainthood thing from Reverend Billy, the Earth Church of the Stop Shopping Church, 36. What was the street?
Avenue C.
Down Street. And it's kind of like Reverend Billy has been doing this for years, this church of his. And I've attended other stuff. And there's a kind of a music, song, and eloquence are all part of it. And there's a certain, even though it's not accepting a God and it doesn't not tell you to do that. It just lets you know that you're okay. And so there was about 100 people showed up the other day. And I didn't know that what, as the first saint of this church, I don't know about acceptance speeches of a saint. And so I just decided, I wheeled in there. So they were talking about saints come out again, as Laurie told you. And I said, you have to amend that when the saints come rolling in, because I'm in a wheelchair. And I thought there might be some kind of a miracle and I might get up and dance, but I didn't. And it's all, anyway, I'm 91. Life is just so much fun to be alive at 91. It's an amazing thing because 3 of my siblings died in childhood. 3 of my siblings died in adulthood. And I don't know why I am the last of us, but I am. And so I think I'll make it till 100. I think I will anyway. And be, but the greatest thing is this wonderful. I'm not sure what we should call it an organization. This gathering of poetry and song and music, eloquence that takes place frequently. I can't get over the brilliance. And then here we are, coast to coast. And thank you, Catherine, for that, and for bringing us there. My brother lived in San Francisco for quite a long time. He was a very famous bartender out there. When he died, there were obituaries in all the major papers. And one of them said, a writer of a column said, there are no celebrities in San Francisco except Mike McCourt. Then wrote this eloquent paean of praise to him. And so it's, I was kind of in a bit of a mood because I saw that in New York here, the garage collapsed, wrecking hundreds of cars. And as when I last looked at it, there were people buried in there. Now, and the absurdity of a whole building collapsing. What kind of justice or what have you, fate is that? Could be, I was thinking, supposing you walk out of your house, go somewhere in the morning, many people call it work, 4-letter word, which I've avoided, and you never come back. Your family are there waiting. If your family are, you say, no, you don't come back. What a strange feeling that must be. But anyway, I was a bit saddened by that. So anyway, I am not going to keep you. Thank you again for all the magnificent contributions. And I just love it. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Malachy.
Thank you. Yes, I love it.
Yeah.
Brendan.
Yep. Cheers. Cheers.
Yep.
And thank you again to everybody who presented tonight, and thank you especially to Lori and Catherine for hosting us all, putting us all together. Malachy is absolutely right that it is a wonderful thing, and that we're able to do this, kind of coast to coast phenomenon is very, very cool. I'm not sure when the next online one will be, but we'll talk about that and we'll see if we can figure something out. And as you mentioned earlier, Lori, the idea of bringing in folks from Ireland live is something that we've done in the past. So we'll probably try to do it on a weekend. At some point down the line, I mean, we like I say, we don't have really the staff or the whatever, the wherewithal to put together like an actual live streaming event that's going to be, coast to coast, like in person with like folks in a room reading and also bringing people in and out. But we're edging towards that, perhaps agonizingly slowly, but perhaps that will be something in the future. But in the meantime, we can leave the room open for everybody to continue chatting if you want for a bit. But again, I just want to thank everyone for reading tonight, and especially, again, I think we should all unmute ourselves and give a big hand to Lori for making it happen.
Thank you, Lori.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Big hand.
Thanks,
I love putting this together. I love
Thank
this.
you too,
So
Brendan.
it's a work of joy for me. So no really thanks needed, but I really, it's just always a marvel how the salon comes together, and they're
Yeah.
just, yeah. Sometimes there's a through line and a theme emerges, and there was nothing ever planned. But that term of being familiar with something in the past and not expecting that familiarity was one of the things that I heard in a few stories. So, and the filmmakers, I like doing multimedia things, and so I really was so thrilled that we had Alex and we had Patty joining us. It was great.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be Irish.
Not that, yeah.
That's exactly.
We're an international group. And there's no religious qualifications. You can be an atheist, thank God, or you can be anything you want.
Yeah.
So you're welcome. Brilliant stuff tonight. My God, yeah. It rings beautifully. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
In the beginning was the word, and then came Irish writers.
Yeah. For those of you who are in the New York area and are interested, we are going to have an in-person salon this coming Monday, so a week from yesterday, at the Ellington, which is our, sort of our current base of operations, in the local area here. That's at 105th Street and Broadway, and they'll be posted on our Facebook page and on our website, and it's already in the newsletter. Hopefully we'll get out another newsletter perhaps by the end of the week, but if not, then let's all just keep staying in touch. And I do think that, especially since the majority of the folks in the room right now are out of town, Larry and Jim talking about sharing writing advice and stuff like that. I think that it's I think it's a great thing that we should all, maybe there's some way that we can figure out having either not necessarily readings, but even just like informal or semi-formal discussions. I mean, I'm not going to wear a tie, but like just talking about craft or talking about, questions of like how to find an agent or how to work with an agent or finding an editor or that kind of thing. That might be of use to people there's something that I'm striving to bring into the mix a little bit more, of things that are just sort of practical help for people who are particularly at the beginning stages of their writing careers, and figuring out how to navigate those things. I mean, there's a lot of resources out there, especially like, you go to like Poets and Writers, seems like every month they have an issue that's just about, finding editors or contests, which are also good things to, I guess, be aware of, as well as just general publishing opportunities. But, these are all different things, I guess. And it's great that we have the capacity to have that interaction, with each other electronically as well as in person. So
there was one thing I want to say was I constantly emphasize about, and I'm no authority, but I'm saying is we should not read. Tell the fucking story. Tell it. And that's and remember what that now easy. Nerves will make a lot of people gallop, and we don't know what you're saying. You don't have to do that. We're your devoted audience. We're waiting with bait. We don't even breathe this. We miss one of your words. So go for it slowly, emphatically. Tell. Do you remember when you were a kid and somebody told you a story? It was always once upon a time. There was a little boy. And then there we are. So anyway, that's my admonition tonight.
Well, it's another thing I think about what we do, the Irish American Writers, is that there are people who are getting their learning how to learning basically how to perform or how to read in public in a like a non-threatening, ideally non-intimidating setting, because it is a thing that doesn't just happen naturally. Even though Maliki, you know, I'm sure you've been performing since you were very young, you know, that it's something that takes a lot, and especially if you're a writer, you're sort of sitting at home alone a lot, and so you're not used to proclaiming yourself, you know, and learning how to project that is its own skill set and a different thing, you know. So
I would just add to that, there are venues to practice oral storytelling. Yeah, the Moth is a great one. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
They curate the stories ahead of time, and
Yeah.
are coaches, and you actually won't get on air or on stage until they convince that you've got a cold and aren't going to go out there and fumble.
No
But
reading.
the difference between the writing that most of us do, which is sitting alone in a room for hours, days, months, or if you're a novelist, years, and you finally finish what you've done. It's to your satisfaction. You send it out to the world, and then and only then do you hear people say, "Well, that doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. It's too wordy." And compare that to oral storytelling in front of a live audience.
Yeah.
You know, in a nanosecond whether you've connected or not, and you have to make adjustments on the fly, or the guy with the big hook is just going to yank you off stage. And so, you know, even for, you know, long form fiction tellers, novelists, who are other extreme of storytelling, I highly recommend the oral storytelling experience.
Yeah.
It'll improve your prose, it'll improve your delivery, it'll improve your pacing. There's absolutely no downside, unless of course you shit yourself on stage out of fear or whatever, but you'll get over it.
Very good.
you can turn that into a marketing opportunity, theoretically.
I want to thank everybody. I have an early morning, so I'm going to have to duck out, but I'm grateful to everybody. I enjoyed everybody's reading, and thank you so much. And thank you, Lori and Brendan, for getting us all put together.
No problem. And thank you, Dave.
I'll see you next time.
Yeah.
And David, all the best.
See you, Maliki. Thank you. Same to you. All the best.
All right. And Kate's got Kate's thanking you, Maliki, in the chat for the tell the fucking story class.
Yes, you gave it to members of the organization for, you know, so generously for free that you wanted to help coach us on how to tell the story. That was wonderful.
Keep doing it.
Yep. Yep. So anybody have any jokes? I want to wrap it up with but
that's one way to kill a conversation.
No, there's a scene, if anybody's watching Succession, there was a very popular TV show. There was an episode early on where one of the characters says that. He's like, anybody have any jokes? Come on, because it's a really tense moment. And it does also kind of kill the conversation, but
yeah,
it's pretty funny. So I think we're going to wrap it up. I'm going to stop the recording. This way now we can all say what we really think.